good morning to the audience. So the things I'm going to cover today is scoping and developing an improvement plan, but one is that is pragmatic and appealing to the audience you have to serve, deriving metrics that measure progress, selling the improvement plan in-house and all the resistance issues you may face in getting people to do things differently, using existing resources to speed up the deployment of the changes, and if you are using published frameworks or even internally developed standards and models inside the company, such as CMMI or ITIL, how to incorporate those in a pragmatic way into the improvement plan itself. So I wanted to start out with a view of the classic approach to how process improvement is typically done. And in this diagram, we have in the target in the middle the processes that typically people would build as part of a standard or classical improvement program. And typically what happens is that a company or an individual would pick up on a framework like CMMI or ISO 9001 or ITIL, and after having read that, they may conclude that there's 5 sections to ITIL or there's 7 process areas to CMMI, and they then derive or create 5 teams for ITIL or 7 teams of people for CMMI. And each of the teams is then charted with writing a document or a process, and then we declare things are complete when the document is complete. And so they take a very process-centric view of the world, and it's really all about kind of compliance to the framework or the model they're being asked to comply to. And if you meet any of those team members writing those processes, and you ask any one individual what kind of business problems are being addressed by the work they're working on, the documents they're creating, the teams may be a little bit vague about just how it ties into the problems of the organization. They may have heard of a group in another building somewhere else that had a problem in planning or testing, and they believe that if their document is complete and then deployed, that other group would then benefit from their stuff. But it's a little vague about exactly who's going to benefit from the process stuff they're working on. And then if you ask the question to the team members, what kind of business goals are being achieved or addressed by some of the process stuff they're writing, they will be even more vague, and may even refer you back to the senior manager and say, well, this person put us up to this, and they would understand how the business goals tie back to this process stuff. So I see myself that the real world we live in is the blue and the yellow circle. That's the problems of today and tomorrow, and the business goals and deadlines we have to achieve. And the process stuff is now independent of that. It really doesn't tie back together particularly well to the day-to-day activities. This approach of focusing on the framework or the model, like CMMI, and writing documents that achieve some level of compliance, that can work, but it's a very high risk of failure, and it isn't particularly appealing to anybody when they see some of these documents that kind of come out. So the next slide shows a pictorial of that, and in this picture, the top of the mountain is the next major IT deadline you have. If it's delivering a system or updating an existing system or providing a service, it's the next IT deadline you have in your department. And the white line represents the improvement program in its classical or standard approach. That is that the team meets, they do their best, they write documents, they try to map the documents back to the frameworks they've been asked to map to, like CMMI or ITIL, but after maybe 6 months, at the end of the white line, they may be a bit lost in the trees, and actually their day job, which is to achieve the top of the mountain, deliver the next IT services deadline, is now kind of behind. So there's no correlation or no tie between the goal at the top of the mountain and the process improvement program wandering around the bottom. So the slide 12 basically flips that upside down and says to scope an improvement program, we don't have to scope it by the framework we're asked to use, like CMMI or ITIL. We could scope it by the issues we face today. And that could be the business goal, the next major deadline, and it could be a business problem which are the challenges each of the team members face in their regular day work. The problems could be lack of testing equipment, a lack of custom agreement on the requirements, change control issues, data migration, server issues, etc. So all the problems that teams face in doing the IT work will be the blue circle. And so the concept here is fairly straightforward, but not particularly well, not used as much as it should be used, which is that the what's going on today can really help you scope and sequence the improvement effort. You don't have to sell the framework or sell the model to other people and get them to kind of buy into ITIL. You can take a problem-solving approach to this, and you can actually sell it naturally by helping people day by day fix their issues. So what I'm going to go through is some examples of scoping and planning an improvement program, but keeping it tied at the very beginning to what people really care about, is the goals and problems they face day in, day out. So this picture here is the rewrite of the mountain picture, and that is that the improvement program is now integrated with the deadlines of the organization. So if we pick a deadline, like the next major deadline you have, to deliver a system by December 15th, there are problems within that deadline. Problems could be lack of test equipment, lack of resources, lack of skills for that particular kind of work you're doing, change in requirements or disagreement about the stakeholders on requirements. So the problems exist for that particular deadline coming up. And so the way this works is that as the team do their day job, which is to write the system and deliver, they do their coding, testing, data migration, and deployment activities, and etc. But they also integrate into that improvement actions. So their process improvement is now problem solving, but it's only the problems that are in the particular goal under scope. And then when they work on the next goal, the next major deadline, they can take on the improvements for that subsequent deadline. So here we have basically a flip of the world to say process improvement is really problem solving, and that keeps everything pragmatic and focused on people, on things that your organization would really care about. So in this picture here, we have the business goals in the beginning and the target. We have the problems that the team members encounter day by day in their regular work in the blue circle. And then we basically feed into this process stuff either from existing life cycles. Maybe there are some good best practices defined already in the organization which haven't been used particularly well yet. We can steal from that. We may have been decided to use CMMI for services or CMMI for development as a framework. We may be asked to use ITIL or kind of ISO 9001, and you can pick any framework you care to as the yellow box there, or the yellow circle. And basically, as we go through the major deadlines of the work of IT and the problems we face day by day, we then borrow in, steal from the yellow circle, and if we do that enough times, we then end up absorbing all of what's in the yellow circle, and then we can declare ourselves compliant or be appraised against things like CMMI. So the first part of this is developing a plan. And it's easy to develop a plan that focuses on frameworks and document creation. It is a little bit more taxing but more useful to build a plan that's focused on what people really care about and then integrate the two activities together. And we'll go through that right now. So I just laid out fairly basic 6 steps for getting a plan going, and then the action plan at the end, and then risk management. And I'll go through a little example of each of these in the slides. So the first one is getting the correct plan ownership and making sure the owner actually cares about the content of the plan and can support it and see it through to the end. Then we'll discuss this stating the major goals and problems and what they would look like. And then if there's a lot of goals and problems, grouping them together to make them a bit more manageable into kind of chunks or increments so we can execute the plan incrementally and get feedback, ensuring the goals and problems are actually compelling before we start.